Hi, this is Randall here in Texas.
And I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are taking a look at a new release horror film. Randall and I are reviewing Last Night in Soho. It stars Thomasin McKenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Matt Smith. This film also marks the final film appearances of Diana Rigg and Margaret Nolan. It is written and directed by Edgar Wright, also known for Shaun of the Dead, Baby Driver, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Now, before we go any further, if you like this review, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, be sure to hit subscribe and ring that bell to get notifications on our latest videos.
Last Night in Soho tells the story of Eloise, a countrywoman who has moved to London to pursue her dream of becoming a fashion designer. Eloise believes that she is having visions of another woman from the 1960s who seems to be having the time of her life. But these visions begin to take a dark turn, and she tries to separate modern day from the onslaught of this past. It has an estimated budget of about $43 million, has received generally positive critical response, but has been very well received by audiences. Matt, Last Night in Soho, new horror film, Edgar Wright. Seems like maybe something's there. What do you think of it?
So, I am actually a little bit conflicted about this movie, but I think I'm more positive than I am negative about it. There's just some things like when I think about it more about like the ending, and I think parts of the message that Edgar Wright's trying to get with this film that I'm a little bit, I guess, uneven with. But generally, I like a lot of the elements in this movie, and I think it's more positive than negative. What do you think, Randall?
So this film for me was like quite an experience. I look at it and I think, wow, that was something else, wasn't it? And I definitely see where it's not for everyone though. So you might watch the trailer for this and think this is okay and I'm going to enjoy this, and then you watch the movie and think, maybe that wasn't what I was expecting. But the way it's shot and the almost constant music throughout it, kind of similar to Edgar Wright's previously mentioned Baby Driver, do bring a flair to this movie that is not very often seen in movies nowadays. So on that side, I was pretty happy with it.
Alright, so with the story and stuff of this, I do like a lot of elements of the plot and everything, and how this is kind of like set up, like, looking at, having an ideal vision of like the world and stuff. Our main character is kind of like, if I could live anywhere, I would live, in the 60s in London. But as with a lot of movies and stuff with this kind of premise, it's like, you know what? The glitz and the glamour of what you think about the past isn't really there, and there's kind of like a dark side or something. So with that, I like this a lot. I like the going back and forth between like modern and like past through like visions, dreams, whatever you want to call it for this film. But for me, I guess where a little bit didn't work as well is like the ending. I like the premise and everything of the ending. There's some elements in there on how we conclude this movie that I'm kind of, questioning the more I think about it. I'm like, does that really stack up kind of thing? But overall, the story and the main premise stuff, I enjoyed with this film.
So I really liked the overall story of this film, but it does end up being kind of a tragic ending. Without getting into too much spoilers, things that maybe you might not have been expected. For me, the one part that really bothers me is there are sections in here where the film unnecessarily slows down, kind of extending the runtime. For example, there's a scene that doesn't really move the plot forward at all, where Eloise, our main character, goes to the cops and she tells them all the story of these visions and everything that she's seen, and it doesn't really have that much to do with what's going on, and really just slows down the story right before you get to the climax. So it's like, all right, here we go. Oh no, and then it tries to ramp up again, and it didn't necessarily do that super effectively. Kind of getting towards the end, and the part for me that was really kind of annoying was there's a plot twist. Like with almost all of these kind of psychological horror type films, they have to have some sort of plot twist, and that twist seemed unnecessary. The story itself that was unfolding was really good. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, plot twist, I'm smart, you know? And I'm like, no, that plot twist isn't bad, but it didn't necessarily add anything to the film story. And at that point, it's just not very earned. And you know how I feel about unearned endings, basically. Go watch a review of Prisoners. I don't think that any of the characters in this film are actually all that interesting as characters. So I'm going to kind of watch that and kind of talk about the portrayals more. Both Tomasin and Anya's characters are fine, but their portrayals of those characters are absolutely exhilarating to watch. And it helps the way it's shot, so the way Edgar has set up his shots for a lot of these characters and how they kind of look at each other and kind of notice each other, but maybe aren't. It's really, really well done. And the rest of the cast, they're serviceable. Like Matt Smith does a pretty good job, you know, and you know the late Riggs, she also does a very good job. So none of the performances are bad. I just didn't find any of the characters extremely interesting, specifically as characters, regardless of whether or not the actors doing the bit were awesome.
Oh yeah, I agree with you on that. You know, our two main female leads, I think, really do excellent performances or whatever for both of those actors. And with Matt Smith, like to start off this movie, his character and oh, not necessarily his portrayal, but yeah, his character was a bit uninteresting. But later, as the film goes on, I think Matt Smith does some things like just his reactions to different situations and other things that kind of add a little bit more to that character for me. So I think Matt Smith actually does a better job as this movie goes on. And Diana Ray or whatever, I think she was excellent in this film for her character and stuff. You know, with the landlord lady and stuff. I think that was a really good performance from her as well. So our four mains, I think their performances were excellent. But yeah, I agree with you. Like as the characters themselves, are they, you know, really interesting? Yeah, I don't know. Hit or miss.
The one character that I will outright say was distracting more than anything, although I guess kind of needed for the script, was the on again off again love interest of Tomasin's character. It's like, hey, my aunt believes in stuff, so just tell me how I can help you. It's like normal people don't act like that, I guess. Uh, you might run into somebody that would act like that, but in the confines of a movie, it was really distracting to find this character who really doesn't seem to fit inside of this mold or this world that was created. He was kind of more distracting than not. And that's not anything about the actor and his portrayal of the character, just that way that character is written doesn't feel authentic as all of the other characters in the movie do.
He's kind of there as like a story structure element, I guess. He's just no matter what happens to this guy, he just keeps coming back, keeps coming back. So for our character, our main character, he's like that. I guess kind of like that one like go to. Oh, not even really go to. Like no matter what happens, to this guy, he's gonna be there.
Yeah, yeah, but you know that's fine if it's like a long-term friend playing that role. Like, hey, I've known this person since we were, you know, in elementary or primary school or something like that. But that's not the case with him. He's just someone that she randomly met at a party one night, and you know, I guess that's enough in London. I don't know. I don't live in London.
All right, so as like a psychological thriller, I think this actually fits the mold pretty well. I did have quite a few elements where I was suspenseful, especially two particular scenes that take place in I would say like the main apartment in this movie or whatever. Two of them definitely kept my fear and attention going on. Other ones though didn't really hold up as much. Especially kind of like some of like the visions, I guess you would say, of like, I don't know if you want to say ghosts, spirits, whatever they are, didn't really hold up for me and actually kind of took me out of the film a bit, especially near the end. And that kind of adds on to my uneven ending a little bit. That kind of puts a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But, you know, like I said at the beginning, generally more positive than negative.
So for me, it depends on what genre you put this film in, whether or not it actually does a good job as a genre film. Some people will say, well, it's a horror film. Like you even said at the beginning of this review that it was a horror film. And I don't think it fits very well in that category. As a psychological thriller, though, it fits pretty well within the category of most psychological thrillers without being too tropey. Not that there aren't tropes, because there are, but it doesn't lean on them. It doesn't go into them like we recently discussed with, Halloween Kills, for example. One of the parts that I didn't like about it is kind of how it gets into, or I should say, really, how it gets out of the psychological bit and towards the end does try and be a little bit more of a horror film and almost have a slight ghost aspect to it. But in all honesty, that's more for our things I didn't see coming category.
And I'm glad you said that too, because that actually is my didn't see this thing coming. Is that exact same point. At the end, those elements and stuff, those, I don't want to say ghost, spooky, whatever elements or whatever, I didn't see that coming and actually took me out of the film.
You see, the thing was, like, if you watch the trailer for this movie, and this is kind of like, this is the part where I had no idea. I'm like, wow, that's weird. That's a weird direction for this to go. You watch the trailer, you see that she's having some interactions, or these two characters are having interactions with each other, and then you get the idea like maybe she's being sucked into this world, and the more she goes into that world, the more you get like Midnight in Paris vibes, where I could stay here, or I have to choose one or the other, but they want out of their world into the modern world, etc. Blah blah blah. That's what I felt. But then this movie decides, no, that's not how it's going to be at all. We're telling a ghost story, and I know that that's getting into slightly bit spoilers, but for me, that was off-putting. It kind of did hurt the ending a little bit from my perspective, and it was just something that, yeah, I did not see coming. I thought we were gonna go in, and have almost a character piece about these people. Instead, ends up being something a slightly bit different.
To me, a little bit with like the aesthetic and stuff too at the end. Like, like I said, I should have seen this coming because, it's taking place in London and we got Matt Smith in here. But I felt a little bit too closely to like a Doctor Who episode or whatever with like the end of this movie, which is fine, completely fine. It's fine for it. Should have seen it. It fits with who created this movie and who's in this movie. But for me, as I guess I was expecting more of like a Hollywood type, and it doesn't really have that Hollywood ending, I guess. So that's actually on me, of having, preconception or whatever, and should have been like, hey, no, that's not what this movie's all. Don't be disappointed that that's not what this movie is, because there's clearly signs that's not that movie.
Yes, it's clearly not a Doctor Who movie. You're right. I wouldn't say that you need to see this in theaters, but that you should probably see this in theaters if you're at all interested in it. These kinds of movies that are, relatively small budget by modern standards, 40-ish million dollars, they're getting made less and less because studios aren't seeing a return on them in theaters. So go see it if you're one of those people who are like, well, they don't make movies like that anymore. Here's a movie like that. Please go see it in theaters, support it, so studios keep making these kinds of movies, and we get to enjoy something that's not an IP, basically.
All in all, I thought this was a pretty enjoyable movie that was kind of enhanced with the visuals of like Another Time and stuff, and like what Randall mentioned before, the music. Edgar Wright movies are really well known for how the music kind of plays into the movies, and I think this follows suit with that. Was really enjoyable. But on the other side of it, the ending was a bit too uneven for me and kind of leaves a little bit of a negative final ending for me that basically hurt my overall experience of it. But generally, like I said, it is a bit more positive than negative. I recommend that you do check it out. Support cinema in general. See it in the theaters. That would be great. Randall and I want to know what you guys think about Last Night in Soho. Let us know in the comments below. Also, be sure to check out some of our other reviews. We have other new movie reviews, flashback movie reviews, take a look at TV shows, and we also have some deeper dive discussions.
Also, don't forget to go check us out over on Facebook. We post the day before what's coming up next on YouTube and some other posts from our other fandoms as well. But if you don't want to check us out on Facebook, that's very meta of you. You can always go look at our schedule. It is every Monday and Thursday. Put us on your calendar. For now, I'm Randall here in Texas. See everyone next time.
And I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day, everyone. Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.